Street. And then we are in the presence of Walter Cunningham, the author of All-American Boys. Also, if you don't know, Walter, Mr. Cunningham, is an astronaut. Apollo 7 first man flight. And then lastly, since I mentioned her name first, Marie Pisano. She is the author of From Barefoot to Stilettos, It's Not for Sissies. She is also the president and CEO of MVP3 Entertainment here in Memphis, and I'm sure she'll talk about that later. But thank you for coming out, and I guess I'm going to kind of be a moderator, just kind of move things down the line, I think. So, Stevie Ray, the author of the Holy Bible, if you would just kind of tell us about the book and the process, and
the book is Holy Bible. Can you hear me? Better? Okay.
there we go.
The book is called the Hillbilly Bible. It is a southern rendering of the Gospel of John. I was almost a Baptist preacher in a previous life, so it just kind of came out of that. The movie that we're doing is going to be a little bit different. I think it's they're going to go in a kind of a different creative direction with it, but we're excited about it. Definitely excited about everything going on with MVP3. Well, the book is the Gospel of John in Southern dialect. The way I came up with that, I was messing around with my writing voice and trying to find it really, and was reading some Mark Twain at the same time, and was doing like I said, I have a background in, I was almost a Baptist preacher, so I did a lot of biblical studies, and I kind of married the two together, and came out with this thing called the Hillbilly Bible. And I discovered a verse in Matthew, which is, surely you're one of them, for your accent gives you away. Just basically means that Jesus had sort of an accent, and the disciples, they had an accent. And I was fascinated with that, fascinated with the implications of it, and what that would mean, what it meant, some of the prejudices of the people who might have been from the city, who have against people who are from the country and their accents. And so it just all blended together, and made a book into it, working on a sequel. Hope you'll enjoy it.
Thank you, Stevie. I think what we're going to do is kind of just move along down the line, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt. Don't interrupt them. You're welcome to interrupt me. You probably can get away with interrupting them. Okay. So we're just going to do questions and answers after. So you can interrupt me and ask me questions. Nothing really, probably won't happen for me, but anyways, I think we will just move along to W.R. Benton, and author of War Paint, and we'll just kind of hear from him.
Yeah. My name is W.R. Benton, and that's a pen name. My grandfather, when I was growing up, I grew up on a farm in rural Missouri, and he was always like my mentor. He didn't raise me, I had a mother and family, but I really kind of worshiped this guy because he was a perfect example of a Southern gentleman. So he's been dead a number of years, and my writing, I'm somewhat of an overnight success. It's only taken 15 years. And people ask me, where does the WR come from? And I thought, well, I'm going to honor my grandfather when I turn writer. And I'm a little bit like Marie in that people told me, you'll waste your time, you'll never make it, this won't happen. Well, my last 30 books have been bestsellers on Amazon. So it can happen, it does happen. But people have to get up off their duff, move a little bit, make things happen, and work with people like her and others, and there's plenty of them out there. Now, War Paint's kind of a different book. It was endorsed by James Drury. Those of you that are older may know him as the man who played the Virginian in the Western. Also, Don Mendel, who's only sold about 140 million books, endorsed it. I'm quite honored with that. I'm not blowing my own horn. I was kind of overwhelmed. I was a country boy 13 years ago with no shoes. Now all of a sudden I've got these people with good names pushing for me. And I think it's quite an honor to have been selected to have a movie made of my book. I'm thrilled about it, but in 26 years of active duty military service, I learned not to get real thrilled until the end of the tour. So once I see the movies here, then I'll go nuts. But until then, I keep everything cool. And I appreciate your time, and I'll talk to any of you individually when I'm finished. So, thank you.
Thank you, WR. Next, I'm just going to go in the order we have them here. We will go with James Howell. He is the author of Echoes on Shannon Street.
Let me ask you, can y'all hear me okay, like this? No?
Okay. This better?
And I always thought I had a really good voice that projected. I guess I don't with y'all. The book I wrote, Echoes of Shannon Street, it's a true crime novel. I spent 25 years at the Memphis Police Department, just retired this year. So the inspiration to write the book was the officers that I worked with and worked for who were there. Now, people who are in Memphis probably remember Shannon Street from 1983. So, trouble is, there was about 100 different stories about what happened and why. So, I got a copy of the case file, and the book is from the case file. I want to say it's a history book, but 3 out of 4 people don't like history, so I just keep that quiet. But it's a Joe Friday book, it's just the facts. And the basic outline of the story is 2 Memphis police officers made a routine call to a house in North Memphis. Once they got inside the house, they were taken hostage by 14 members of a religious cult whose leader believed that the end of the world was coming. One of the officers was shot. He was able to escape. Second officer stayed in the house. Police surrounded the house. Siege went on for 30 hours. At the end of the siege, the TAC unit, which is Memphis's name for the SWAT team, they went into the house, and after a brief shootout, killed all 7 suspects. On the surface, it just sounds like another police story, but it's really not. I just want to make a few quick points about why this story is different from any other story in regards to local law enforcement. Number one, having 2 police officers kidnapped is almost unheard of. Having 1 police officer kidnapped is unheard of, but having 2, you can research all you want, you won't see it happen that much. Number 2, during this 30-hour siege, there are 2 cardinal rules that hostage negotiators follow. Number 1 of them is you will negotiate as long as the hostage takers are negotiating back, as long as you have give and take. Once that stops, once the hostage takers stop talking, stop communicating, then the hostage negotiators will step aside and have the TAC unit go in. The other cardinal rule is during negotiations, if there's a belief that hostages are about to be harmed or will be harmed or are being harmed, negotiations in, the TAC unit goes in. Both these cases, both these cardinal rules were broken at Shannon Street. Number 1, the 30-hour siege, what little negotiations there were lasted for less than an hour. In fact, the two negotiators who were actually there that I spoke with, that I worked for, said there was none. The case file says it was about an hour. But anyways, so there was no negotiations. It was just the police talking to a dead phone to dead space. Number two, regarding hostages being harmed, Bobby Hester, the officer that was inside the house, they beat him almost continuously for 8 hours. They had his handy-talkie, which they keyed up, so all the police officers could hear this officer being beaten and hear his screams. Now, the windows had been shot out in the house because there was a pretty brisk gunfight at the beginning, and officers 30, 40 yards away could hear it. So, and that went on for the 8 hours until he died. Actually, they fractured his larynx so he couldn't talk anymore, but that's when he stopped screaming. But that was after 6 or 7 hours. So, again, nobody went in. So, and I promise you, that's never happened in the history of this country with any hostage, not just a police hostage. Even in this book, I mentioned the fact that 11 months prior to this, at St. Jude Hospital, they had a hostage situation. The hostage taker in that particular incident, all he did was stop communicating. He just said, look, I don't want to talk anymore. And he implied that he might commit suicide. Negotiations ended right then. They sent a TAC team in and they killed him to save the hostages because it was the threat that he might hurt a hostage. So you've got about 200 officers that have post-traumatic stress syndrome because that's what the title is Echoes, Bobby Hester's Echoes. When you hear a man screaming for God and his wife and his mother, it's sad. Sad. And last, and I'm sorry, I get emotional, it's awful. Anyways, last point, the 7 suspects that were killed, that represents the largest number of suspects to be killed in a non-riotous local police action in the history of this country. More so than the world-famous SLA shootout with LAPD officers. So those 4 points right there alone tell you that this incident, any of those by themselves would make this an event that is up there with all the major events that's ever happened in this country, but it's not. And I'll end and tell you why it's probably not. Several publishing houses in New York, that there were agents interested in my book, and the publishing house, they went to them and said, hey, this is a great book. And their response, every one of them, they said the same thing. Nobody cares what happens in Memphis, Tennessee. So it wasn't a story, they just looked down upon this city. But anyways, it's a really good book, and I do not give you a 10-cent version of what happened. You get the book, what you read is exactly the case file. If you're looking somewhere in there for me to bail you out and tell you what happened, it's not. I want you to read the book and you decide what happened and why. Anyways, thank you.
Hey there. So we have been graced with the presence of Yvette Whiteside from Local 24. I'm going to let her take over. She's much more suited for this role of kind of taking control of the situation / question and answer later to come. So Yvette's here. We're going to finish up with Mr. Cunningham and Marie, and then it'll be open for question and answers. But here's Yvette.
Hello. Thank you all so much for coming out.
Better late than never.
Exactly. Okay, so we're moving right along with Walter. And of course, you know, he is known for the All-American Boys. He is known for being a NASA astronaut, an Apollo 7 pilot. I had a chance to